you're moving from place to place.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. We're just at about 7:44 a.m. this morning. And in the conversation, we continue the discussion this morning with Bradon Roberts, Tobago officer for TTUTA. And this morning we're speaking about the recently held, I shouldn't say recently held, but rather the recent C results that would have been presented on our national platform, looking at the technological advancements being used by the Ministry of Education, and more specifically here, awaiting the feedback from the Division of Education, Research and Technology in the context of the Tobago space. Good morning to you and welcome, Bradon.
Good morning, and it's always a pleasure to be on the platform.
So we want to get started from the national level and that national perspective, the position and perspective of TTUTA in relation to what would have been presented as the outcome and the overall analysis and statistics thus far in Trinidad and Tobago coming from the Minister of Education.
All right. Well, it's not something that we should be surprised about. We would have had a slight increase in terms of the math scores and the language arts scores as we are back. This group had almost an entire academic year face-to-face. So we know that the online engagement was not ideal. It was more of an emergency response. But there was an improvement. To say that we are satisfied as to what our students are producing at this time, well, we can't do the same things we've been doing all the time and expect that we're going to have a drastic change. So the results, they are a little better than last year, as expected with the face-to-face, but it is not where we would like our students to be at.
Tell us something, Bradon. Recently, we had a discussion with the Minister of Education, and the issue that would have been raised, or rather seeking the feedback of the ministry, is that we saw schools facing a challenge to transition in the context of when COVID came upon us quite suddenly, and that greater use of technology to the extent to be able to adapt as quickly as possible. However, for some private schools, university, and so on, it seemed very much commonplace. And, it happened almost, seamless, so to speak. The question that would have been asked to the minister then, and, we're now asking you from the perspective of TTUTA, are teachers prepared to work along with the ministry in the context of putting a system in place so that even if it is the mechanism happens that, all right, we still have our weekly school schedule, but once a month, we out there in terms of the platforms and so on, getting us accustomed so that that transition isn't as technical in these circumstances? What's the perspective of TTUTA?
Yeah, I really love the comparison with the private schools and the universities who would have their level of funding. Now, the issue with the technology advancement and going online, it is funding. And we are yet to have a policy for online engagement because the ministry know fully well they have a lot of work to do in getting schools ready. Now, what we would have now, if we just say teachers need to be ready, then teachers need to take their money and buy the things that the schools need. We still have schools that if you have, let's say, 10 teachers logging onto the system and you have about 5 students, that system would not be able to suffice that bandwidth needed. We don't have widespread on the island in Tobago. I would say there are still several, we'll call them black spots, where you don't have internet connectivity. So there are so many things to be built out. So it's not that teachers are not willing to do online, but the system that we have, the infrastructural works that needs to be done, we don't have that just yet.
Are you hopeful that we would make that kind of progress? So should anything come upon us, we won't be caught again, as the people say, with our pants down and not prepared?
Well, I would like to be hopeful. The reason why the discussion is not advancing is because we have this no money syndrome. So the Division of Education have no money. The Ministry of Education have no money. So how are we going to build out this thing? So there are willing stakeholders to advance the conversation, but money talks. So if we do not have devices available for teachers and for students, or even the infrastructural build out for technology, then all we would have is people with hope. And those teachers who can afford to buy their own stuff would so do. Those private institutions and the boards who may be able to have a strong alumni to assist them may be further ahead than other schools. So it will no longer have a level playing field. So unless we put our money into technology and building that out, we're going to have an unequal stepping forward to this idea of online engagement.
All right. Today we see that the Division of Education has set a media briefing to speak to the SCA 2023. What are your expectations from where you sit as the Tobago officer for TTUTA?
Well, the way in which results came out this year would have been very difficult to get the data. However, I would have been reaching out to the various schools, talking to some of the teachers. Even some of the principals don't have an idea as to how their school would have done in comparison to other schools. But that aside, the information seems that, well, maths and language arts would have had an increase, like the national release that the ministry would have put out. But the creative writing, and Tobago been behind in the creative writing for some years, I would say. So I'm not certain if it's the rubric that we are using or is the application of the rubric. There's greater need for training in terms of applying the rubric to the creative writing element. But there are some teachers who said that their students would have been getting 18, 19 out of 20 when they were practicing. And some of those same students would have gotten 12 and 13. Now, one mark in creative writing has so much weight in the overall scoring of SEA. So your child could get in the 90s for maths and language. And if they don't have a good creative writing score, will not be nowhere in the top 100. So the creative writing, there needs to be some level of either greater training or a revisiting of the rubric to ensure that we are offering our students the best there. But overall, we have a lot of reading challenges on the island. I'm not seeing where we have reading programs. I'm not seeing where we have particular projects in Tobago to sort out the shortcomings in our education system. We have the traditional way of teaching, and we try to finish the curriculum to ensure that these students have all the content for exams, but it's not as meaningful as we'd want it to be.
What are your recommendations in terms of some of the changes that ought to be made? We've spoken to it for some time about the need for a curriculum that is also able to speak to the child and the young person growing up in Tobago for a greater understanding of the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. TUTA's perspective.
Well, I know the secretary may be getting tired of me referencing the Tobago-centric curriculum, but it's an idea that I really got excited about. We have the traditional way of teaching, but we do not have the same children that we had 50 years ago. We have now where children question you. When long ago you give a child an instruction and they learn it by rote or so forth, and they are able to regurgitate it. Now we have students who want to question why. They want a deeper understanding to be able to have ownership of what they know. We don't have a curriculum that affords such. So I am hoping that we have schools either assigned projects. So either a particular school is agriculture based, so their mathematics, their creative writing, their vocabulary is along the line of agriculture. So at least it has some application where students can readily understand how this maths affects my life. Now, a lot of my colleagues, even when we meet up now, would say, a lot of the things that we have learned in school, we don't apply them in life today. So if we make it a little more meaningful, we use these thematic approaches. So we talk about the woodwork and the metalwork and so on. We don't have to wait until secondary school. We could have that taste of it in a primary school where you use it when you're discussing angles or you're using measurement, have some of the real life things. But if we don't have projects that are also funded where stakeholders have an understanding. Scarborough Methodist School, they are working on tourism. So you have persons from tourism who could visit the school every now and again and give persons that experience, do little tours, in addition to flavoring the curriculum where your creative writing could be a tourist visit and things that along that line. What we have is a host of topics that we need to cover by a particular time frame. And persons, some teachers are really versed at linking it, and some teachers are not so versed. So that's why we have the disparity.
Interesting developments. Now, I know we're talking C, but just before we close off this morning, we got to get your perspective if TUTA has taken a position on it just yet. Two critical areas that you the perspective in relation to, one being the new national hairstyle general policy guidelines that have been provided by the ministry. And two, we are into July, August, and we're starting this conversation at the beginning of July, if it has not started already. Your discussions with the Division of Education in relation to the annual school repair program.
Right, so firstly, the whole conversation about the hairstyle is unfortunate. And the response of the ministry, it's disappointing. We see a need nationally to just respond to a situation that happened with a particular secondary school. To me, there's a bigger conversation about school rules. So we have a rushed response to, I guess there was a stakeholders meeting and then a rushed response to hairstyle. So what happens next year when a child wants to graduate in a short pants? What happens next year when our child wants to graduate with pink shoes? Let us talk about school rules in general and the purpose of school rules than just have a knee-jerk reaction to this particular hot topic that we have. There are cultural aspects, there are persons who are talking about racism, so it's not something to have a rushed response to. It's something you need to take time and massage. What is the purpose of these rules and so forth, and give schools an idea as to what kind of leeway and need to have, because culture and how culture is developing and so forth. But I'm not satisfied with the response in that we are creating a bigger stir because everybody is talking about it still, despite the ministry putting out this guideline. Well, I would say guideline, this rule.
All right. And very quickly, the
repair program?
Repair program.
There are still contractors, I was informed, who have not yet been paid for last year. So I don't know how that funding would be for the repair program this year. Scarborough Secondary School continue to have problems. Signal Hill Secondary School, I know Roxborough had a host of issues since last year. We have some of our primary schools that have their issues, and even with the health and safety of St. Andrew's School with the rat infestation, we are still seeing where rats and we are seeing rat droppings again. The mold is resurfacing. So there are a lot of things to be done. The issue is funding, and the cries I've been hearing about lack of funding in the division of education, specifically where we have a lot of teachers with outstanding funds to pay. They're not paying those money because they have no money to pay. So to say that we have conversations at the division to see how we're going to treat with the repair program, I do not know where the funding for the division is coming from. So I'm not optimistic that we could have a proper repair program this year.
All right. Thank you very much there, Bradon Roberts, Tobago officer for TTUTA, and providing the perspective of TTUTA as it relates to the C 2023 results, and of course other general updates here in the Tobago space.